During this section of the course, we're going to take a look at some import features built into Microsoft Excel. You may have data from other sources such as text files, CSV files, databases, whether that's an Access database or it's some other database in the back end. Maybe it's a web page that you want to be able to pull data from. But you've got external data that you now want to import and work with inside of Microsoft Excel. So during this video right here that you're watching currently, we're going to first take a look at perhaps one of the most common sources to import data from. We're going to take a look at importing from a text file or a CSV file. Really, the import's the same for both. In this instance, we're going to be importing data from a tab delimited text file. Now, I'm going to show this to you. I'm going to show you what the text file looks like by default. I'm just going to open it up on my computer in the native application, in this case, Notepad. We'll see what it looks like, and then we'll see how to import it into Microsoft Excel. Now, I do want to point out that I am currently working inside of Excel 2019 through Office 365. Now, Microsoft changed the way that imports happen from various sources in the newer editions of Microsoft Excel. What I'm going to show you here was available inside of 2016 by default, 2013 if you downloaded the Power Query add-in, as well as 2010. But if you're on 2007, you're on 2010, your interface might look a little bit different just depending on what commands you have there. But the old import wizard is still available. And actually, I've got videos that are inside of this section about the old interface as well. So you look at your interface, you say, hey, does it look like mine? If it doesn't, then you can jump ahead, you can skip these videos, and you can take a look at the older version of the import wizard that'll accommodate on your system. So just watch for that. If your interface doesn't work here, look for the other video. And it should just be the next couple of videos coming up. Now, inside the newer releases, and like I said, I'm actually going to open up the text file in front of you first. Here it is. This should have been downloaded. Hopefully you downloaded the exercise files at the beginning of this 102 section of the course. Inside of there, I've got one called Sales Data Text Import. And this is what it looks like. And on the Windows system, I give it a double click. It automatically opens it up inside of Notepad. And if you're on a Mac, you may open it up inside of Text Editor. But regardless of what it opens up inside of, it's a tab delimited file. I've got column headers along the top, rows of records down below, and each column is separated by a tab on my keyboard. Right? Typed in year, tab, month, tab, type, tab, and so on. Or the system that this got exported from used the tabs for us, and it separated that data. Now, ultimately, that tab delimiter is going to help Excel identify the data and how it should be structured inside the document, where the column break should take place, and so on. Now, this is tab delimited, but another very common one is a comma-separated document, where each column or each value will be separated by a comma. Now, there's actually several different types of delimiters, and we'll actually see that as we start to import this data. So let me move this. I'll close that window, get my folder out of the way. So inside of Excel, I'm going to go to my Data tab, top of my screen, and I'm going to find the Get and Transform Data section. Now, like I mentioned, this is a newer, within the past few versions of Microsoft Excel, the Get and Transform, which has all of your import options here. Now, ultimately, once we start importing, this is going to take us into Excel Power Query, where we can ultimately do some additional transforming of the data if we'd like. Or you can just start to load it and dump it directly into Excel. Now, I'm going to go into Get Data, From File, and I'm going to go into From Text CSV. I'll give that a click. This is going to ask me to navigate, just so you don't have to watch me navigate my folders. I'll move that off for a moment. Let's find it. So you're going to navigate to wherever you located or downloaded those files to. There's mine, Sales Data Text Import. I'll give that a double click just to import that. Give it a moment, and this is going to open up my import wizard. Now, like I mentioned, if you're working on a much earlier version of Excel, your beginning step here is going to be a bit different. They take you through what's called the text import, and I'll show you where that's located at. And there's another video that I actually walked through the entire steps for the earlier version of Excel. So here, first option, I have file origin. It's Western European, Windows. It's a tab delimited document. You'll notice that it's nice and formatted down below. You do have other delimiters if that's what your file calls for. Like I said, tab's a very common one. Comma is another very common one as well. So I'm going to keep it set to tab. Excel does a good job of identifying that for us. Typically, sometimes not always completely accurate, but you can choose your delimiter right there. It is basing the data off of the first 200 rows. You do have some other options here, but for performance reasons, the first 200 sounds good. Now, lower right corner, I've got a few options. I can use the load to operation, where I get to say, hey, create a table, and dump it into my Excel worksheet. And I am working in just side of a brand new blank workbook here with a single sheet. Or I can go into transform data, which would open up a secondary interface, Excel Power Query, where I can start to transform the data and clean it up. All sorts of operations inside there. If you haven't gotten into Excel Power Query, highly recommend you get in there and take a look at what Power Query is all about. Now for this example, I'm just going to go to load to, and it's going to give me a few options. Where do I want to import the data? I'm going to keep it in a table. I do have the option here to be able to put it in a pivot table or pivot chart as well. I also have the option to dump it into what's called a connection or create a connection only. Now, the really neat thing about importing this data through these commands here is the table that we're about to create here is actually still connected to the original source, that original Notepad document that I opened earlier. So if somebody updates that Notepad, that text file, I can then refresh my table here and I would get the updated data. Okay? Connection. People still working there, I can update it here, get the update that I need. Now for just the example here, I'm going to keep it in a table. I'm going to do an existing worksheet rather than a new one. You can do a new one if you'd like to. And I'll keep it inside of cell A1. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Give it just a moment, and there's my data. Nice and imported. Very little input on my part, really just what's the file, what's the delimiter, and what do you want to do with it, and you got your data inside of Excel. So now I can start calculating it, sorting it, filtering it, creating pivot tables, whatever I need to do, all based off of that text file that we saw earlier. So try this out. Again, it's on your data tab, underneath get and transform. I went to get data from file and from text CSV. Try it out.